Previously on In the Heartlight, after losing his wife during childbirth, Mr. Julian dedicated his life to raising their twin daughters, Lillian and Millie. When his second marriage ended because his new wife mistreated the twins, Julian vowed to focus solely on his daughters' future. He sold his family's carpentry shop and moved them to the city so the twins could attend a prestigious academy. Working multiple jobs as a janitor and furniture store clerk, Julian stretched every dollar to support their education. Despite the community's mockery and financial hardships, the twins excelled academically and developed dreams of pursuing maritime careers. Now, as university acceptance letters arrive, Julian faces his greatest challenge yet, finding a way to afford their tuition while battling eviction from their small apartment. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if you want more stories that touch the light within your heart, like this video, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. Welcome to In the Heartlight. Let's begin. The coastal university campus sprawled magnificently beside the ocean, a world away from their humble apartment in the city. On move-in day, Julian helped the twins settle into their dormitory, assembling furniture and arranging their modest belongings, while other parents hired professional movers for their children's extensive possessions. "We don't need all that stuff," Millie whispered to her father as they watched a team unload a designer wardrobe across the hall. "We've learned what really matters." When the time came for goodbyes, Julian maintained his composure until reaching his car. Only then did he allow tears to fall, not from sadness, but from overwhelming pride mixed with bone-deep exhaustion. For the first time in 18 years, he would return to an empty home. The twins' university experience proved challenging in unexpected ways. While academically prepared, they encountered social divides they hadn't anticipated. Many of their classmates came from wealthy families with generations of maritime tradition and connections. The twins' scholarship status and modest background made them outsiders in some circles. Some of them have never even done their own laundry, Lillian confided during their weekly phone call with Julian. "They look at us strangely when we mention jobs." Unlike many scholarship students who took simple campus jobs, the twins found positions directly related to their future careers. Lillian worked weekend shifts at the harbor master's office, while Millie assisted in the marine research laboratory, cataloging specimens and maintaining equipment. Julian, meanwhile, had secured a position as a furniture consultant at a high-end restoration shop. The owner had recognized Julian's expertise and hired him primarily for his knowledge rather than physical labor. A welcome change as Julian's body showed signs of years of overwork. "I'm actually using my woodworking knowledge again," Julian told the twins during their calls. "It feels good to discuss craftsmanship instead of just cleaning floors." What Julian didn't mention was that he had moved to an even smaller apartment to reduce expenses, or that he still worked night shifts at the warehouse to send the twins a modest monthly stipend for books and necessities. Midway through their sophomore year, disaster struck again. The restoration shop closed suddenly when the owner suffered a stroke, leaving Julian unemployed with little notice. Within weeks, Julian received an eviction notice as development plans advanced for his apartment building. For the first time, Julian's careful financial juggling collapsed. Too proud to tell his daughters, he spent 2 weeks sleeping in his car while searching for both work and housing. Only when a routine health check at a community clinic revealed dangerous blood pressure levels did Julian finally admit his situation. Not to his daughters, but to Madame Elena, who had remained a constant supporter through letters and occasional visits. At 87, Elena was no longer able to travel to the city, but she made a series of phone calls that set a remarkable chain of events in motion. Within days, members of Julian's former community, people who had watched the twins grow from infants, organized assistance. a former customer offered Julian temporary housing in a garage apartment. The village minister contacted connections at a furniture manufacturer who needed a quality inspector. When Julian protested that he couldn't accept charity, the minister corrected him firmly. "This isn't charity, Julian. This is community. You and those girls touched many lives in our village. Consider this an investment in all you've given others." The twins discovered their father's circumstances during a surprise weekend visit home. Finding Julian in the small garage apartment instead of his former place, the truth emerged through careful questioning. "Why didn't you tell us?" Lillian demanded, upset at her father's suffering. "You needed to focus on your studies," Julian explained simply. "Not worry about me." That evening, sitting in the tiny apartment, the twins shared news they had been saving. Both had been selected for prestigious summer internships. Lillian aboard a training vessel with the Maritime Authority, Millie at an oceanic research station. Both positions came with stipends. "We'll send half our earnings to you," Millie insisted. Julian shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. Those funds are for your education and professional development." "Papa," Lillian said gently, taking his weathered hands in hers, "you've carried us long enough. Let us help carry you for a while." The compromise they reached allowed Julian to maintain his dignity while accepting limited assistance. The twins would focus primarily on their education, but would contribute to an emergency fund for their father's medical needs and housing security. Their junior and senior years passed in a blur of academic intensity. Both twins distinguished themselves in their respective fields. Lillian received commendations for her leadership during an emergency sea rescue during her training voyage. Millie co-authored a research paper on marine conservation that received national attention. Julian's health stabilized once he settled into less physically demanding work as a quality inspector. On weekends, he began volunteering at a community woodshop that taught carpentry skills to at-risk youth, a role that reconnected him with his true passion. "I'm using my hands to build again," he told the twins during one of their visits. Not furniture this time, but confidence in young people who need it. As graduation approached, both twins secured impressive post-university positions through their service scholarships. Lillian would enter officer training with the Maritime Authority with a fast track to command positions. Millie had been selected for an elite marine research unit focusing on climate change adaptation. The evening before graduation, Julian sat with his daughters on the beach near campus. The moon cast a silvery path across the water. The same moon that had illuminated their small apartment during countless late study nights. "Your mother would be so proud," Julian said, his voice catching. "She always said you would do extraordinary things." "We had an extraordinary father," Millie replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Everything we've achieved began with you, Papa," Lillian added, "with what you taught us about persistence, sacrifice, and doing what's right regardless of the cost." Julian looked at his daughters, no longer identical girls but distinct young women with determination in their eyes and purpose in their hearts. All the years of sacrifice, all the physical pain and financial strain, all the lonely nights. In that moment, he would have done it all again without hesitation. What he couldn't know was that his daughters had been planning something special. Something that would transform not just his life, but the lives of many others. Graduation day dawned bright and clear. Julian sat among hundreds of other proud parents in the university's grand amphitheater, wearing the one good suit he had preserved for special occasions. When Lillian and Millie crossed the stage, Lillian receiving honors in maritime leadership, Millie in marine environmental science, the announcer added something unexpected. Both graduates are recipients of the newly established Jasmine Julian Memorial Scholarship for Academic Excellence in Service. Julian felt tears spring to his eyes at the mention of his late wife's name. The twins had never told him about establishing a scholarship in their mother's memory, using the combined stipends from their internships. After the ceremony, As families gathered for photographs and celebrations, Julian found himself approached by university officials and several distinguished-looking individuals in formal maritime uniforms. "Mr. Julian," began the university president, "your daughters have shared your remarkable story with us. It's an honor to meet the man behind these extraordinary young women." Captain Reynolds, who had retired from teaching and returned to active maritime service, stepped forward next. "Julian, I've been training officers for 30 years. The quality of character your daughters possess can't be taught in any classroom. That comes from home." Julian accepted their compliments with humble gratitude, unaware that more surprises awaited. As they moved toward the reception area, the twins guided him to a private room where a small gathering had assembled. Former professors, mentors, and several high-ranking officials from both the Maritime Authority and the Oceanic Research Institute. "Papa," Lillian began, her voice steady despite her emotion, "we want you to be the first to know about our first official assignments." Millie continued, "I've been appointed to the International Marine Conservation Commission as Junior Environmental Advisor, with a focus on restoring coastal habitats like our villages. And I'll be serving as first officer aboard the Authority's newest research and training vessel," Lillian added. "The position comes with faculty status at the Maritime Academy." Julian embraced his daughters, overwhelmed by their achievements. "I always knew you would accomplish wonderful things," he whispered. "We're not finished," Lillian said with a smile. "There's something else we need to show you." After the reception, the twins drove Julian to a beautiful residential neighborhood overlooking the harbor. They stopped before an arts and crafts-style home with a sprawling front porch and large windows that caught the afternoon light. Behind the house stood a spacious detached workshop. "Whose home is this?" Julian asked, admiring the craftsmanship evident in the woodwork. The twins exchanged glances before Millie handed him a key. "Yours, Papa." Julian stared at them in disbelief as Lillian explained, "Our positions come with substantial signing bonuses and housing allowances that we don't need. We'll be living on base and at sea most of the time, so we pooled our resources." "This is too much," Julian protested, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Let us show you inside before you decide," Millie suggested gently. The home's interior featured natural woodwork and built-in cabinetry that reminded Julian of pieces he had crafted in his prime. The kitchen opened to a sunroom overlooking a garden. Upstairs, they showed him the master bedroom and 2 additional rooms they had furnished as guest quarters for when they could visit. But it was the workshop that finally broke Julian's composure. Fully equipped with professional-grade tools, natural lighting, and a design desk, it represented everything he had sacrificed years ago. "The local arts college has already expressed interest in having you teach woodworking classes," Lillian said quietly. "Only if you want to, of course. And the Maritime Historical Society needs someone to restore antique ship furnishings," Millie added. "They've offered a consulting contract." Julian sat heavily on a workbench, running his hands over the smooth surface. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it," Lillian urged. "Say you'll finally do something for yourself after all these years of doing everything for us." "We're not asking permission, Papa," Millie said with gentle firmness. "The house is already in your name. The mortgage is paid in full." Julian looked up in astonishment. How was that possible? The twins explained that their story had touched many people. Their university mentors, impressed by the twins' dedication to honoring their father, had connected them with alumni who valued family legacy. Several foundations supporting education and maritime traditions had contributed matching funds to their own savings. "People wanted to be part of this," Lillian explained. "Not just for you, but for what you represent. The parent who sacrifices everything for their children's future." That evening, sitting on his new porch as twilight settled over the harbor, Julian watched his daughters chatting animatedly about their future plans. For the first time in decades, he felt the weight of responsibility lift from his shoulders. His girls had not only succeeded, they had soared beyond his wildest hopes. As if reading his thoughts, Millie came to sit beside him. "Are you happy, Papa?" Julian nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "You once told us that your sacrifice was an investment," Lillian said, joining them. "Well, today your investment pays its first dividend." Julian finally found his voice. "I would have been content just seeing you succeed. This," he gestured at the house, the workshop, the harbor view, "this is far more than I ever dreamed." "Good," Millie said with a decisive nod, "because we're just getting started." Julian didn't understand what she meant until the following day, when the twins revealed the next phase of their plan. A plan that would ultimately transform not just Julian's life, but the community that had shaped them all. 3 months after graduation, Lillian and Millie invited Julian to join them for a return visit to their childhood village. The community had declined in their absence. The fishing industry struggled with changing regulations, younger residents had moved away seeking better opportunities, and several businesses had closed, including Madame Elena's bakery, after her passing the previous winter. "It's sad to see it this way," Julian commented as they drove through the main street. "This place was once so vibrant." Instead of continuing to their old neighborhood, the twins directed their father to the abandoned schoolhouse where their mother had once taught. The building had fallen into disrepair, windows boarded and playground overgrown. "Why are we stopping here?" Julian asked. Lillian withdrew a folder from her bag and handed it to her father. Inside were architectural plans and legal documents. "We've purchased the school property," Millie explained, "and several adjacent lots." The plans revealed a comprehensive development. The school renovated into a modern educational center focused on marine sciences and sustainable coastal industries, surrounded by a medical clinic, community center, and small business incubator. "We're calling it the Jasmine Julian Institute for Coastal Education and Development," Lillian said softly. "Mom was a teacher. We thought this would honor her memory properly." Julian studied the plans, noting the detailed specifications for buildings constructed with local materials and traditional craftsmanship. This would revitalize the entire village. "That's the idea," Millie confirmed. "Our positions give us connections to funding and expert resources. The Maritime Authority and Research Institute both support establishing regional training facilities. We need someone to oversee the construction and restoration work," Lillian added meaningfully. "Someone who understands quality craftsmanship and can train local workers in traditional building techniques." Julian looked up from the plans to find both daughters watching him expectantly. "You want me to manage this project?" "Who better?" Millie asked. "You built your own business here once. Now you can help others rebuild theirs." The project launched the following spring, bringing immediate employment to local craftspeople and creating hope in a community that had been slowly dying. Julian relocated temporarily to supervise the renovations, living in a small apartment above what had once been Madame Elena's bakery. His workshop skills, dormant for years, flourished as he designed custom elements for the buildings and trained younger workers in traditional techniques. Former neighbors who had once pitied his struggles now sought his advice and leadership. 6 months into construction, an unexpected visitor arrived at the worksite. Claire, Julian's ex-wife, stood awkwardly at the edge of the property, watching the activity. Julian approached her cautiously. Nearly 15 years had passed since their bitter parting, and time had not been kind to Claire. Financial hardship was evident in her worn clothing and tired expression. "I heard about the project," she said without preamble, "and that you were involved." Julian nodded, unsure of her purpose. "I lost my banking career during the financial crisis," Claire continued. "I've been working retail jobs since then, barely making ends meet." When Julian remained silent, she added, "I thought perhaps, with all the hiring happening here, There might be an administrative position suitable for someone with my background. Julian studied the woman who had once treated his daughters with such cruelty. His immediate instinct was refusal, but something, perhaps the years of hardship that had taught him compassion, made him reconsider. "That would be my daughter's decision," he said finally. "They're the project directors." Claire's eyes widened. "They wouldn't want me here." "You might be surprised," Julian replied. "They've learned that holding on to anger hurts only yourself." Later that week, when the twins arrived for their monthly site visit, Julian mentioned Claire's request. He expected resistance, but found none. "Hire her if she's qualified," Lillian said simply. "Everyone deserves a second chance." "Besides," Millie added with a small smile, "it would be good for her to see what became of the worthless, clumsy children she once belittled." Claire was offered a probationary position managing accounts for the construction project. Her banking experience proved valuable, and her attitude, humbled by years of struggle, was markedly different from the entitled woman she had once been. On a crisp autumn day, as the main building neared completion, the twins suggested a family visit to their mother's grave in the village cemetery. Julian hadn't visited in years, finding the memories too painful during their hardest times. The simple headstone had been recently cleaned and bordered with fresh flowers. As Julian stood silently before it, Lillian and Millie stepped forward to place a small model ship beside the flowers. "We talk to her sometimes," Millie admitted, "especially before big decisions. We like to think she's somehow guided our paths," Lillian added, "that she knows what we've accomplished." Julian placed his hand on the cool stone. "She would be most proud not of your achievements but of who you've become, your character, your compassion." After a moment of silence, Millie spoke again. "There's one more place we need to visit today." They drove to the outskirts of the village where a modest building stood on the edge of a community garden. A sign above the entrance read, "Jasmine's Gift, Community Milk Bank and Family Support Center." Inside, volunteers prepared donor breast milk for distribution to mothers unable to produce their own, while others assembled care packages for struggling families. "When we were researching Mom's medical records," Lillian explained, "we discovered something you might not know. After we were born and before she passed away, Mom arranged to donate her breast milk to premature babies in the hospital. Even in her final hours, she was thinking of helping other children," Millie continued. "We've established this center to continue that legacy." Julian remembered the early days after Jasmine's death, how village women had helped provide milk for his infant daughters when he couldn't afford formula. The circular nature of this giving struck him deeply. "We've created an endowment to fund this center permanently," Lillian explained. "No parent in this region will ever have to worry about feeding their newborn." As they toured the facility, Julian observed photos on the walls, not just of Jasmine, but of all the women who had supported their family after her death. The twins had remembered every kindness, every meal delivered, every hour of childcare offered, and found ways to honor each person. That evening, as they sat on the porch of what had once been their family home, now renovated as a guest house for visiting experts and educators, Julian reflected on the transformation taking place around them. "When we lost this house and the shop," he said quietly, "I feared I had failed you both, that you would look back on your childhood and see only lack and struggle." "What we saw was love, Papa," Millie replied. "Every sacrifice you made showed us how much you valued us." "You taught us that true wealth isn't measured in possessions," Lillian added. "It's measured in how much you're willing to give to others." Julian looked out over the village, his home for most of his life, now being reborn through his daughter's vision. The sun setting over the harbor cast long, golden rays across the water, illuminating fishing boats returning with their day's catch. "We've come full circle," he observed. "But this time, we're not alone on the journey." The twins nodded in agreement, their hands finding their fathers as they had countless times throughout their lives. 3 people united by love, sacrifice, and now the opportunity to transform not just their own story, but the stories of an entire community. 20 years passed. The once struggling coastal village had transformed into a thriving center for marine education and sustainable industry. The Jasmine Julian Institute now occupied an expanded campus where hundreds of students from across the country came to study coastal ecology, maritime trades, and traditional craftsmanship. Julian, now in his 70s with silver hair and weathered hands that still created beautiful things, had become something of a local legend. His workshop at the Institute trained a new generation of craftspeople who combined traditional techniques with innovative, sustainable practices. Furniture and vessels bearing the Julian craftsmanship mark commanded respect worldwide. On a bright summer morning, an impressive cruise ship appeared on the horizon, making its way toward the expanded harbor. Standing at the helm was Captain Lillian Julian, now one of the most respected figures in international maritime leadership. Beside the ship, providing escort, was a sleek research vessel commanded by her sister, Dr. Millie Julian, whose groundbreaking work on ocean ecosystem restoration had earned international recognition. The village had prepared for months for this day, the 20th anniversary celebration of the Institute and the community revitalization project that had changed so many lives. Julian waited on the newly constructed pier, supported by a handcrafted walking stick, a gift from his apprentices. Around him gathered the entire community, including many faces from the past, former neighbors who had once helped with the twins, former students now leading their own projects, and even Claire, who had found redemption through her administrative work at the Institute and now directed its community outreach programs. As the cruise ship docked, Julian felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Not from the heart condition that occasionally troubled him these days, but from overwhelming pride. His daughters had not only succeeded in their careers, but had created something lasting and meaningful that extended far beyond themselves. The celebration lasted 3 days. There was the dedication of new facilities, recognition of community leaders, and showcases of student achievements. Documentation teams recorded oral histories from original village residents, preserving the story of the community's transformation for future generations. On the final evening, a gala dinner was held in the Grand Hall of the Institute. Julian found himself seated at the center table with his daughters on either side, surrounded by dignitaries, educators, and community members. After dinner, Lillian rose to address the gathering. 20 years ago, my sister and I had a simple goal: to honor our father's sacrifice by giving back to the community that shaped us. What happened since has exceeded anything we could have imagined. Millie continued, "Our mother once told our father that the greatest gift a parent can give their child is opportunity. Our father took that to heart, sacrificing everything to give us chances he never had." A screen behind them illuminated with photographs. Julian in his original workshop with infant twins, the cramped apartment where they had lived during the academy years, Julian cleaning the library, the twins at graduation, and finally the groundbreaking ceremony for the Institute. Today, Lillian announced, we're proud to unveil something special. A documentary titled Investment in Hope: The Julian Family Legacy. This film tells not just our family's story, but the story of how one person's sacrifice can transform generations. The lights dimmed, and the documentary began with a familiar scene: Julian signing away his carpentry shop to fund his daughter's education, followed by his words that had become the Institute's motto: "Some investments cannot be measured in money, only in hope." Julian watched with tears streaming freely down his weathered face as his life's journey unfolded on screen. The struggles, the hardships, but also the triumphs and joys that had followed. The documentary featured interviews with people whose lives had been touched by the Julian family. Students who had received scholarships, craftspeople trained in Julian's workshop, families supported by the community programs. When the lights rose again, the entire assembly stood in applause, not just for the documentary, but for the man whose quiet courage had started everything. Julian, overwhelmed, could only grasp his daughter's hands tightly. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Julian slipped away to a quiet spot on the harbor wall. The night was clear, stars reflecting on the water, while lights from the cruise ship and research vessel created a gentle glow over the harbor. Lillian found him there first, bringing a shawl against the evening chill. Millie joined them moments later. For a while, the three sat in comfortable silence, watching the water as they had done countless times throughout their lives. "Did I ever tell you," Julian finally said, "about the night you were born?" The twins exchanged glances. Their father rarely spoke of that painful time. "After your mother passed and they handed you both to me, I was terrified," Julian continued softly. "I had two tiny lives completely dependent on me, and I felt utterly unprepared. I remember standing by the hospital window, holding you both, wondering how I could possibly be enough." He paused, watching a fishing boat navigate the harbor entrance. An old nurse came in. She must have seen my fear. She told me something I never forgot. She said, "The measure of good parenting isn't found in perfection, but in persistence. Just show up every day and give them your best, whatever that looks like today." Julian turned to his daughters, his eyes bright with emotion. "That became my philosophy. Some days my best was barely enough to keep us fed. Other days I could give you more. But I always tried to give you my best." "You did more than try, Papa," Millie said softly. "You succeeded beyond measure." "Look around you," Lillian added, gesturing toward the village lights. "This is what happens when someone believes in the potential of others so completely that they're willing to sacrifice everything for it." Julian smiled, thinking of the countless parents who had made similar sacrifices throughout human history, most without the remarkable outcome he had been blessed to witness. "I'm just one father among millions who would do anything for their children." "But you're our father," the twins said together, the way they had as children. As they walked back toward the celebration, Julian realized something profound. The legacy he had built wasn't found in buildings or programs or even in his daughter's impressive achievements. It was in the principle that had guided him from the beginning, that investing in the potential of others, especially children, was always worthwhile, no matter the personal cost. The next morning, as the cruise ship prepared to depart with Lillian returning to her duties, Julian stood on the deck with his daughters, watching the village grow smaller on the horizon. The journey had come full circle, from the day he had sold everything to launch them toward their dreams, to this moment when those dreams had expanded to include so many others. "People keep asking what's next," Millie commented. "What more could we possibly create?" Julian smiled, thinking of the new generation of students at the Institute, the children in the village school named after Jasmine, the apprentices in his workshop. "The investment continues," he said simply. "Through all those we've touched, who will touch others in turn." As if to confirm his words, the ship passed a training vessel filled with Institute students practicing navigation skills. They waved enthusiastically, recognizing the Julian family on the cruise ship's deck. "That," Julian said, pointing to the young faces, "is what's next. Then that is enough." The cruise ship's horn sounded as it turned toward open water, carrying the Julian family toward new horizons. Their shared past honored and their legacy secured, not in monuments, but in the lives they had changed and the community they had transformed through the simplest yet most powerful of human motivations: a father's love for his daughters. If this story touched your heart today, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to In the Heartlight. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of love, sacrifice, and triumph that remind us of the extraordinary strength of the human spirit. Check out our other videos shown on your screen now. Stories just like this one that celebrate the quiet heroes among us whose dedication changes lives and communities. Thank you for watching. Together, let's keep these heartfelt stories alive, one heart at a time.